Hi, hey, hi. It's me, your Void, and this is the second part of this Adventurerathon madness that I've gotten myself into. I have lost track of how much I have read so far, and not even my spreadsheet can help me with that because it is all over the place at this point. I do know that I have ticked off almost all of the very big books, which is good because I am now not slumping, but I'm hitting this low in my reading mood that I hit every month in the middle of the month. And I expected this. If you remember how I started my first vlog, I expected this, which is why I put off reading my mangas, my comics, the shorter stories like A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So I have a plan. Or rather, I had a plan, because I already executed it. I read 4 mangas in a row, starting with Nyankees Volume 3 and 4, and despite the main characters of all of these being cats, I did not use this for the cat prompt, I used this for the donkey cabbages with a bonkers plot. Because Nyankees follows a bunch of street thugs, but they're all cats, they're all street cats. And I think that's a rather bonkers plot. In Volume 1 we have a new cat on the block who is just looking for someone, but people are very territorial, cats are very territorial, so they challenge him to basically fist fights, paw fights, I guess, because he is not sticking to the rules that the predominant cat gang has established. So he just gets into fist fights with everyone, but he wins. So now these cats are like, hey, you're our new leader. And he's like, I don't want to be your leader. But they are like, yeah, but you're our new leader. And then Volume 2, there is a rival gang that is intruding on the territory of that first gang, and he's still sticking around, so he just keeps fighting people and keeps winning. And by the end of Volume 2, he says, okay, cool, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna help you do whatever it is that you're doing with these cat gangs here, and in return you are going to help me find the person I'm looking for, because he's looking for another cat. The why is not really explained. We just know that he's looking for a cat. A male calico cat, which is very rare. You do get cat facts in these mangas. But it is also teased at the end of Volume 2 that there are some evil cats coming. One of them is like a super plush one and is apparently using catnip or something against his opponents. The second one is a sphinx cat. He's like running around half naked but covered in tattoos, which is his skin stuff. And he's just super creepy. And the last one is he just wants to fight people. So that is teasered by the end of Volume 2. Now we hit Volume 3, and these 3 super duper cats are doing what they are set out to do. I think they were hired by another cat. That wasn't quite clear from the get-go, but by the end of Volume 3 you figure out, okay, yeah, they were hired by another cat specifically to target that first cat that came into this whole gang thing and started fighting everyone. The problem is, with these 3 super duper powerful special cats, their setup is much more powerful than the execution of these characters. The cat that likes to fight people, yeah, he beats one important character up real good, but then that cat's brother shows up and he gets beaten. The naked guy doesn't even do anything, he's just sitting there and looks scary, which is why most of the cats run away, but then one cat just sits down and stares back at him and then he runs away, and the catnip guy is defeated because we found a cat that is immune to catnip. I didn't know there are cats out there who don't react to catnip in the first place, but there is one cat in this whole thing that is immune to catnip, so he is immune to the way this guy fights, and this guy literally cannot do anything else. He just rolls in catnip, and then people just lose their shit when they come across him, except this cat, so this cat is just and pushes him into the water because that is apparently what neutralizes the catnip, and that's how he wins. So the setup for these 3 cats is a lot more powerful than the execution of what they're supposed to do. And then in Volume 4, things get interesting again, because now we see the cat who hired these 3 cats. They are starting to execute their plan. I think their plan is to take over everything and have like a giant cat gang empire or something. But in order to do that, they trap the main characters in a warehouse and basically cover them in wet food and collect any and all stray cats in the area and tell them whoever beats all of these cats gets free food for the rest of their life. And then Volume 4 ends with like a mass attack on these main characters. I don't know where this is going. I have 2 more volumes of Yankees left to read, and maybe, just maybe, I will read one of those to finish out the fables for the special page, because you need an animal POV, and given that all of these people are technically cats, I might be doing that. If I somehow find the time to do it. I don't know. And then I read some more mangas, namely I reread volume 1 and 2 of Fire Force by Atsushi Okubo, which is the mind behind Soul Eater, and Soul Eater is one of my favorite manga series of all time. I also like the manga of Fire Force, but I think Fire Force, because of the fact that it is such a dynamic world, such a dynamic plot almost, with characters that have very dynamic capabilities, it does do better as an anime. The sound design of the anime is also chef's kiss. But I wanted to reread this because the manga is now done, the anime is now done, and Fire Force turned out to be a prequel to Soul Eater. So the way this ends is the start of the world of Soul Eater. So that is very interesting. I'm looking forward to how they connect all of this. But in Fire Force, we follow characters who are fire soldiers. Specifically fire soldiers, not just firefighters. Firefighters are something else. Because in this world, people just spontaneously combust. And they don't just burst into flame and then die. They turn into fire monsters, and they try to set everything around them on fire, especially people. So you have fire soldiers who are trained to take these monsters out, while firefighters try to prevent things from burning down. And these fire soldiers also have fire powers. People have fire powers in this world. There are different generations. I'm not quite sure about Generation 1. Generation 2 can manipulate fire, and Generation 3 can make fire themselves and then do stuff with it. For example, this is our main character Shinra, and he can make fire on his feet, and later on he learns how to use them like a jet engine, and he can basically fly with that. Then we have Arthur. Arthur can make fire in form of a plasma blade, and he uses it as a sword. He also thinks he is a knight of the round table. These characters are over the top because that is what Atsushi Okubo does. But yeah, in volume 1, we are introduced to the world. So volume 1 is just info dump. It is basically a series of episodes almost, where you see, okay, person 1 bursts into flames, this is a fire monster, here is how the world works. And then another one bursts into flames, this is how the world works. Another one bursts into flames, this is how the world works. The first one, we see Shinra, and we are introduced to the concept of what is a fire soldier. Then we have one that bursts into flames, and we see how fire soldiers without powers work, because the leader of Company 8 that we follow, he doesn't have any powers, so he is just casually whopping around 30 kilograms of just gear in order to not die when confronted with one of these monsters, but also in order to be able to fight these monsters. And we very much focus on Shinra and his character motivation, which is he wanted to become a fire soldier because his mom turned into one of these monsters and she burned down the house, and his little baby brother died in that fire, and a fire soldier came and rescued them. But because Shinra is a Generation 3 character, he can make fire, so people were like, was it the mother? Did he make the fire? People were unsure of it. And he has this weird, let's call it habit, of smiling when he is nervous or is scared, and he has a very interesting grin. Can you see it? Yeah, you can see it. Like, he has a very interesting grin, and every time he's nervous, it's like it's on full display. I can't find a picture of it right now, but the main issue in his life is that he is smiling in inopportune places. And he was smiling after his house burned down, his mom and his brother died, and he was standing in the wreckage, his feet on fire, and he was smiling. So people started calling him the devil, and he leaves the devil's footprints, which is just burn marks in the shape of his feet when he does things. So he wanted to show the world, no, I'm not the devil. I don't set things on fire. I'm a hero. And he wants to become a hero, which is why he wanted to become a fire soldier. And that's basically it. In volume 1, we just go over, okay, this is what fire soldiers do. This is how these people who burst into flames, how that happens. And we have people just show off their superpowers. This is one of his teammates, for example. It's just, okay, these are the powers, these are the generations. It's very info-dumpy. And if we're not info-dumping about the world, we're info-dumping about Shinra and why he's doing the things he does. And then in Volume 5, we have the obligatory info-dump training competition montage that every action manga needs to have very early on for some reason. And in this one, it is framed as a friendly competition between all of the firehouses to show off the capabilities of their newbies. And how do we do that? Well, we set a house on fire and we put someone in who is representing one of these fire monsters, and we put people in that play the victims. It is actually quite similar to a normal rescue training mission of normal-ass firefighters, if you think about it. Shinra goes in and he finds someone who shouldn't be there because someone is in there. His name is Joker, and he has dispatched of all the actual firefighters and fire soldiers inside that house because he wanted to talk to Shinra personally. Because he knows some stuff that Shinra is looking for in terms of information. Here is the thing. I know what Joker's deal is. I know what he knows, I know how he knows it, and I know why he is interested in Shinra and what he's doing in the background. I know all of that. Because again, this is a reread. I also watched the anime to a certain part. I'm only missing the last season of the anime, so I know some stuff. But without that context, without that 2020 hindsight, Joker showing up at this competition, specifically wanting to talk to Shinra, is so random. He just shows up, is like, I have information that you don't have, blah. And then he just disappears. He's not even letting Shinra ask some questions. And Shinra doesn't even ask questions. He just sees a guy who does bad things and wants to get rid of him. And Joker is just showing Shinra, hey, I know things you don't know. Okay, cool, bye. It is so random. So if you start reading Fire Force or you want to watch Fire Force and you think, what the fuck is Joker's deal? Just stick with it. Just stick with it. It takes a second, but just stick with it. It will make sense in the end. Trust me, bro. And then by the end of Volume 2, we start one of my favorite story arcs, because these firehouses are not working together. Technically, to the public, they are all united in the goal of finding out why people burst into flames and how to stop that from happening. But all of these firehouses have different, let's call it, sponsors. The first one, for example, the first firehouse is very religious. There is a religious element to it all. They have a giant-ass cathedral and they follow the religious path of the thing because they are sponsored by the church. Then you have Firehouse number 5, for example, which is important because that is the story arc. Firehouse number 5 is working for Hajima Industries, which is a company that makes sure that everyone is safe. They make everything. They have their fingers in everything. And Firehouse number 5 works for Hajima. And this is where the plot comes in, because Firehouse 8, which we are following with these characters, was specifically built to investigate the other firehouses, because the person who, I think it was the president, basically, thinks that all of the other firehouses have very important information on this phenomenon of combustion, but they don't share. And he thinks that if we combine the knowledge of all of the firehouses, we could fix the issue. That's what he thinks. And he's probably right. The first clue, or the first, let's call it, angle of attack we take is that Obi, you know, the chief of Group 8, wants to investigate Group 5. Because they go to a scene and Group 5 shows up, even though they have no jurisdiction, because the scene is in the jurisdiction of House 8, and they deal with it, but then House 5 shows up and steals the fire creature before it can be dispatched. Because that is what Firehouse number 5 does. They do science with all of this fire stuff. So Obi is like, okay, fuck it, we need to start somewhere. Let's start with Firehouse 5 because they are shady as fuck. And Obi actually thinks they already figured out what causes these spontaneous combustion cases. So my favorite story arc starts with, okay, cool, let's go investigate Firehouse 5. And then conveniently, a member of Firehouse 8 is kidnapped by Firehouse 5 because that member of Firehouse 8 is an old acquaintance of the leader of Firehouse 5, and they have some beef going on. So Obi says, okay, cool, how about we just attack them? Just like flat out war, we just attack them. Because they gave us a reason to. So we have this epic battle between Firehouse 8 and Firehouse 5. It's a wee bit David vs. Goliath because Firehouse 8 only has a few members and Firehouse 5 is well funded, has a bunch of people in it. There's a lot going on. But they literally just go and break into Firehouse 5 and then they just fight their way through it. And when I say fire soldiers, I mean fire soldiers. This is my favorite character, Hinawa. He was a soldier before he joined the fire soldiers. His power is gun. This is also when we see his actual ability. He's second generation, so he needs a spark that he can manipulate. And he shoots guns and then uses the spark, the ignition spark, to shoot a gun to redirect bullets. And if you know me, you know that I love the Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan, which is doing the same thing but with magic. So we have a Powder Mage in Fire Force. But yeah, we start the storyline of the fight between the 5th and the 8th. We see Hinawa do his thing. We then stop right before Arthur has a big fight against the named character, so yeah. But I'm just like the first time, I had a really good time with this. It is all over the place. It is hilarious. And because it is so action-packed, it's actually a quick read. Like, a lot of panels are just a lot of this. You see? Like, it's just a lot of action. And this is actually the reason why I think it does better as an anime than as a manga, because there is so much movement. It is such a dynamic thing. Fire is a very dynamic thing. I had fun with this. And I read this for the squad goal, so this goes down for Robin Hood. I am still kind of in a low at the moment, so I think I will continue with reading short things. I still have a couple of comics. I still have the Klaus comics. I still have A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, so I know that is, I have some quick things I can knock out until I find my reading mojo again. Anyway, I will talk to you once I finish something else. Hello. But I am losing steam. I have lost it already. It has gone away. It's nowhere to be found. There is no more water in my steam engine tanks. So I am currently reading I love this short stuff. I mean, I already talked about how I read manga after manga after manga just because I needed a break, kind of for my eyes, kind of for my brain. But I wanted to read something in between, like read, not just look at pretty pictures. So I picked up Ensnared by the Werewolf by Lillian Lark, which is part of the Bathhouse romance series. It's a monster romance, and Lillian Lark has never done me wrong, and she continues to do right by me. Ensnared by the Werewolf is kind of the companion novel to Found by the Lake Monster, because in Found by the Lake Monster you have a lake monster going into heat, so he contacted this love bathhouse, hey, I need an emergency date that is down to shag and nothing else, because I have an issue. So this bathhouse arranged an emergency date for him, and then someone else stumbles into his domain, and that happens in that book. In Ensnared by the Werewolf, we follow the emergency date. The emergency date is getting lost on the way to his domain, and while she's getting lost, she's getting attacked by a werewolf who turns out to be an ex-client, ex-almost boyfriend. It's an entire thing. But the story is that this guy came into her shop. She is a witch, and she specializes in uncursing, breaking curses on people, and he comes into her shop and is like, hey, I am cursed. I am a wolf shifter. I am supposed to be a human that can shift into a wolf, and then from a wolf can shift back into a human, but now I'm kind of stuck in between in your typical werewolf form. And I mean humanoid wolf, not wolf go big, that kind of werewolf. So they work together over weeks and weeks and weeks in order to try and figure this curse out and eventually break it. But by the end, she has to go for a last-ditch effort, and she didn't want to go for that because there is a risk if she fucks it up that he could be permanently cursed. But they still do it, and then things backfire, and they have this relationship with each other because the first time they met each other, they both realized we are mates. The energy is there. The attraction is there. We are like two planets locked in orbit. But they said, okay, let's fix this thing first and then we can do stuff, because he was very insecure about the way he looked as this stuck in the middle wolf thing. So he was like, I don't want to be the monster. Let's fix this first and then we can see where this is going. But now he's stuck as that. So he's like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. Despite her consistently telling him, I don't care. I have no problem with the monstrous side of things. I actually prefer the monstrous side of things, but he is not ready because he doesn't accept himself that way. And then shenanigans happen, and we then end up at this lake, and things happen. It's just a novella, it's not even 100 pages long. But again, Lillian Lark manages to bring a character depth to a monster erotica, and especially such a short one. This is the shortest thing I have read by her, and still she manages to give these characters depth. Of course, it is not as deep as the full-length novel of Deceived by the Gargoyles and Tranced by the Basilisks, yada yada yada, but it is still there. I genuinely admire Lillian Lark's ability to bring such an understanding of her characters to these things she is writing. It is so good. I like that one a lot. And this thing brought my reading mojo back for a little bit, because it was 84 pages and I have been reading 1 if not 2 books a day for this month so far, and I felt like reading more. So I then picked up Limited Liability by Trisha Owens, which is the second book in the Sin City series, I want to say. And in that story, you follow Maximilian and Ethan. Ethan is from a small town in, I think, Idaho. He's a country bumpkin, and his big dream was to work for the FBI. And in order to do that, he went to a security service conference in Las Vegas where he met Maximilian, and they hit it off in a very strange way, which ended in them agreeing to a dom-sub relationship, as in no feelings, just the kink. And they live it up. In this second book, we now see them live together, which is part of their arrangement. Maximilian said in his, I don't want to call it protocol negotiations. They're still working towards that. They put down some ground rules, and one of those ground rules is Ethan is going to live with him and is basically available to him whenever he wants to. It's not quite free use, but it's basically free use as long as they are in Maximilian's house. At the same time, Ethan is starting to work for Maximilian at his company, which is a security company. Part of the story is that there is a problematic client. The other part of the story is we are mostly in Maximilian's perspective, which I like, because the first book we spent mostly in Ethan's perspective, and now in Maximilian's perspective we see how he is struggling with arranging himself in this kind of relationship, because he likes to compartmentalize. He likes to say, this is my business, this is my private life, and his private life has been non-existent for a couple of years now. And now Ethan is in his private life, but also in his professional life, so he's a bit unbalanced and trying to figure out how to do that. And they also need to work on their communication style a little bit. They do talk to each other, but only after a problem arose out of not talking to each other. It is not quite a miscommunication trope, because the second a problem arises, they are like, buddy, the fuck? And then they start talking about it and figure it out. But the fact that they not immediately recognize there is a problem themselves, because they're not communicating to each other. It's always, Maximilian has a problem, so stuff happens. Ethan recognizes that and tells Max, hey, talk to me, and vice versa. So we need to work on that, but given that there are, I think, 9 more books in this series, they hopefully will get there. And I just vibe with both of these characters. I can't tell you why, but I'm vibing with these characters and their inner conflicts. I did want to hit Maximilian in this one a couple of times, because he is very, very insistent on the fact that there are no emotions at play here, when there clearly are emotions at play. There is a third character that comes in and literally has to remind Maximilian, A, you do have emotions, and B, these emotions are connected to that guy. And he's like, no, this is strictly physical, and who the hell are you to tell me that I have emotions? Like, apparently nothing he does in this second book is according to his character, when we believe all of the people who have been working with him for years. What is the one thing that changed? I wonder. But yeah, I enjoyed that one as well. So I read these, not quite back to back, but I read them pretty close together. I think like I read Ensnared by the Werewolf, then I went and walked the dog, and then I came back, and then I read Limited Liability. It was that close together. And that knocks off 2 more entries in my Adventurerathon. If I could only remember which ones. Ensnared by the Werewolf is for the dog prompt. I remember that because I was so hard pressed on finding something that features a dog, and then Kirsty was like, you do know that this prompt also involves werewolves? And I was like, yes! So that was for the dog prompt. And Limited Liability was for the opposites. That is, I believe, the townhouse and the country mouse. The opposites prompt, because Max and Ethan come from very different backgrounds. Max is very much Silver Spoon, and Ethan is a country bumpkin. and also the dom-sub relationship. And apparently, according to Kirsty, the cover itself also counts as swapsies because there is a dark shirt and a light shirt on the cover. So, coolio! Triple threat! Nice! But yeah, I will get back to you once I have something to report on. Hopefully I got my reading mojo back now. I went back to reading comics because I don't know, I just needed those quick wins, you know? I needed those quick wins. So I decided, haha, after Summerween, I kind of forgot to read a second comic for the supernatural slash paranormal prompt. I forgot that I have to read a second comic for that. So I picked up the House of Cutter for that one, which is also in the Slaughterverse. It is I think they are just anniversary editions, ? But in those 3 comics we follow Maxine, who was a white mask and is now training to become a black mask, but in order to do that she has to travel to different houses because the House of Slaughter doesn't have black masks capable of training her anymore. So in the first volume of this series, I guess, the Book of Slaughter, we got some background on the House of Slaughter, and then she went to New Orleans to be trained by their black masks. In the Book of Butcher, where she went to the House of Boucher, also known as the Butcher Shop, and we learned some history about that house and the family that ran that house before, but also stuff about the monsters. And now in the Book of Cutter, she goes to England, to the House of Cutter, to learn about their history and how black masks work. And what these anniversary editions do, they are not necessarily there to give you a background plot like the House of Slaughter comics do. This is more the info dumping part of it all. It is the world Bible. How do things work? How things have come to pass in the Slaughterverse. In Book of Slaughter, you get the background of the House of Slaughter. In the Book of Butcher, you get the history of that house and what, for example, a legacy house is, and you learn something about the monsters that all of these hunters are hunting. And now in the House of Cutter, you get the whole history of how the house was founded and how it found its way to America. Because we are in London, it takes real world history of the British colonization and adds the houses, the Order of St. George, to it, and how they came to the New World and how they spread. And you get journal entries of one of the first missionaries who founded the House of Slaughter, for example. And you just get world building and history and all of that. And my world building loving ass was so here for this entire series, and this third one just gives you all of it, and I very much love that. It is a tie-in to the main series, Something is Killing the Children, which kind of gave me a little hiccup. I haven't read the story arc with the doppelganger yet, and you kind of have to read that first before you read the Book of Cutter. It's not a big deal, I could still follow the entire thing, but there's tidbits. Some character connections are there. The mentor, for example, Maxine's mentor in this one, he was also... was he the mentor, or is he opposed to the one person we meet from the House of Cutter in the story arc in Something is Killing Children? Something like that. So it is interconnected, but like the House of Slaughter series, it is interconnected in a way that, yeah, we name drop some things, but you can completely read it on its own. There's no major crossover, like, for example, the Arrowverse, where you would not understand an entire episode if you didn't watch all 3 other things in the universe. So you can read it on its own. I did. So yeah, I enjoyed my time with that. I love everything that exists in the Slaughterverse, so James Tynion can't do wrong. He can't do wrong, period. So nothing big to talk about that. And then I kept reading comics because I thought, okay, this prompt I hate. I'm currently in a mood to get quick wins, and for this prompt, because I hate it, I put down 2 comics, so I was like, might as well read it. And I read 2 Klaus comics, Klaus and Crisis in Xmasville and Klaus and the Crying Snowman, and I read those for the Christmas in July prompt that Kirsty insisted on having. I will not let her have this. I will never not complain about having to read a Christmas thing in the middle of summer between heat waves. I do not like this, period. Reading Klaus was my compromise for it because A, these comics are short, and B, they are actually fun and only tangentially have something to do with Christmas. They are not your tacky Christmas bullshit, you know? So I read those. That was my compromise. Crisis in Xmasville was such a fun read because it was literally Santa versus capitalism. Literally. Also aliens. The entire alien aspect of the Klaus comics takes me out every single time. For context, he got his superpowers from people on the moon, and sometimes he has to help them fight people from other planets. It's so dumb. But in Crisis in Xmasville, there is this entire village. It was a company village, and there was a war. There was a civil war between this company and Santa Claus, I think 30 years ago. And now the dude who was the CEO of the company comes back, and his son or grandson is helping him redo the whole thing. And it is a whole shtick on Coca-Cola without name-dropping Coca-Cola because copyright. So these two company people come back, and they want to revive not only this company town, but they want to basically take over Christmas and completely commercializing it as Xmas. And in order to do that, they steal kids from like roadsides, some like from like traffic things. They steal kids and their parents and and they steal the imagination from them to turn them into mindless husks they can control. The parents are all turned into basic bitch mall Santas, and the kids with them, they have more imagination. They feed anti-Santa Claus. He looks like Klaus, but evil. And he's literally the antithesis of him. And he's fed by these kids and their imagination. And Klaus comes in and is trying to free these kids, but he's beaten by himself until himself saves him. Because Santa Claus is a culturally locked thing. You know how different cultures have a different version of him. You have Santa Claus. In Germany, for example, you have the Christkind, which is basically the Jesus baby doing Santa Claus things. They all do the same thing, but they have different mythologies. So when Klaus is beaten by Anti-Klaus, another version of him, Father Frost in this instance, is saving him, helping him, and then putting him back into the battle with more power because he sends his daughter, I think, with a super cool staff, and then they tag team against evil Santa, and the power of love survives the whole thing. It is very epic. I love that. I love that so much. And in the end, Coca-Cola just evaporates. So yeah, it is Santa Claus versus capitalism and aliens and an evil version of himself. And then in the Crying Snowman, Ragnarok is actually caused by aliens, and Santa Claus has to stop it. Do you see what I mean when I say that these comics are inspired by Christmas but have nothing to do with Christmas? Because they don't. Also, the Crying Snowman has the hottest version of Klaus yet. I love me a little Silver Fox moment. Yes. And in the Crying Snowman, Klaus meets... Well, he's not meeting a snowman. He reintroduces a snowman to himself. Because the snowman has a consciousness, but when it gets warm, he becomes dumb and forgets. So Klaus takes him somewhere where it is extremely cold, namely Titan, you know, the moon of fucking Saturn, where it is extremely cold. So now suddenly this snowman has an intelligence and starts remembering stuff, and then they fight these Ragnarok aliens that come by every 1,500 years or something. So Ragnarok already happened because of these aliens, but back then we had the Norse gods fighting them off, and there was a war, and yes, the aliens were defeated to a point where they had to leave, but now, because people have stopped believing in those gods, and a bunch of gods died back then, we don't have a defense system against these aliens, and now they are coming back. So now we need Santa Claus and all of his versions to fight them. And we have the snowman in the middle of it all for some reason, and by the end we have to turn time back because everyone died. Like, all of the versions of Santa Claus died, so now we have to turn time back, which we do. Klaus himself just grabs the giant wheel that is time turning, and he just stops it and then turns it back, injuring himself, also aging himself because of all of things. And in the end, love wins because he tells these aliens, hey, you don't have to fight us on Earth when all you want to do is have some solar energy from our sun. You can just go there, say hi on your way in, bye on your way out. So we just find peace. The original war apparently was fought because the Norse gods attacked first, something like that. I don't know. It is not that deep. And then by the end, there is a beautiful story for the snowman, because the snowman had to dive into a lake on Titan, which was extremely cold, so he became a genius and he remembered everything. Turns out he was human, he was kind of a shitty dad and husband, then had a car crash and died, but because we turned back time, Santa made it possible for him to not die in a car crash. He saved the snowman before he became a snowman, so now the dad is like, I'm gonna be a good dad to my kid, and that is the end of that comic. Yeah, it's hot Santa fighting aliens with a snowman sidekick. Again, it's not that deep. These reads are fun. These are quick. If you want to read something for Christmas that is not necessarily Hallmark Christmas squishy, sticky bullshit, read the Klaus comics. They are very fun. And yeah, I got that over with the Christmas prompt, I mean. And then I felt like reading something with less pictures and more words, but not a fully fledged novel. So I picked up Down Among the Sticks and Bones, which is the second book in the Where Were Children series, which I started earlier in this readathon. I think it was in the first vlog. Yes, towards the end of the first vlog. I read the first one and I loved it. And the second one is even better because it is spooky in the best way possible. We have vampires, and we have Dr. Frankenstein, and we have the twins from the first book. And we see the story of how they found their door, or in this case, their box, and went to the other world. And we see them live in the other world and adapt to the other world, and then why they had to come back to our world. And let me just tell you, they have horrible parents. Like, their parents had kids for all the wrong reasons, and then they continued to make the dumbest decisions ever for these kids. Like, they were actually better off in that horrible world, like the horror world, than with their parents. Like, what the fuck? I love the fact that they were finally able to become their own people and not just the people their parents wanted them to be. Like, what the fuck? Also, justice for their grandma? Like, what the fuck? What the fuck? These people are horrible. I'm very glad that Jack and Jill managed to find their door and just go somewhere where they were able to live happier lives, even though, given the setting, you wouldn't think they were happy. They were allowed to be themselves, finally, and I love that for them. And was it Jill? Yeah, it was Jill. I want to take Jill and shake her. That bitch fucked everything up because she felt entitled to certain things. That little bitch. But at the end of the first book, we know that they went back to the world they wanted to be in, and I'm very glad they did, because they do belong in that other world, and I'm so glad that they managed to find their way back. I hope we can see them again one time, but I'm not mad if we don't. I know that they are going to live their best life, that they're going to live the life they want to live, and that is all I ever wanted for them. And I love the fact that this novella highlights that kids can be spooky if they want to be spooky, and also what it can do to personal development of a child when a parent has such a rigorous form they want to put the child in. Like, Jack and Jill were completely opposite of what their parents wanted them to be, and I have to ask myself how much of that was because they saw their sibling being allowed to do all these other things. Like, Jack and Jill, Jack was raised as the feminine one, and Jill was raised as the tomboyish one. And I have to ask, okay, did Jill want to be the girly one because she wanted to be the girly one, or because she saw that her sister was allowed to be the girly one, and vice versa? So that is just such a psychological mindfuck, especially when you have twins. Why would you? No. These parents, I want to slap them so hard. They're just not good people. So yeah, I am happy that Jack and Jill found their happy ending, even though it might not seem happy for a lot of people. For them, it is a happy ending, and I love that they found it. I now have to figure out what I want to read next. I think I want to try my hands at a novel again. I do feel like reading after reading Sticks and Bones. I do feel like reading again, so I might try my hands on a novel again. I have a bunch of them still left on my TBR, and I'm kind of running out of time, so I do kind of need to read a novel at some point. But I do feel like reading again, which is a really good thing. So I will hopefully try to cash in on that. Hello, I read a book. I'm holding it right there. Tricked by Kevin Hearn, which is the fourth book in the Ironwood Chronicles, and the first one I didn't reread in like a bunch of years. I read the first three when I was I think 16 or something, and then I reread them for a previous run of the Adventurerathon, and now I finally continue the series. And I have to say, I don't like this one. Mostly because it is two stories in one book, kind of. It does follow right after the events of book 3. In book 3, things happened where our main characters, Atticus and Granuaile? How do you pronounce that? There is a pronunciation guide in the back, thankfully. But it doesn't tell me how to pronounce the name. Anyway, Atticus and his druidic student and his dog, they have to move away from Arizona because of things that happened. And they have to pretend that they died so that a bunch of gods don't come after them. And we start this book off with Atticus pretending he dies. He has to pretend to die by gods killing him, which kind of is hard to do because they are gods. So he enlists the help of a Navajo god, celestial deity. I am not familiar with the mythology of the Navajo to know what the correct term for it is. I think it is First People. I think this person is part of the First People. It's Coyote, it's like a trickster entity, and Coyote passes himself off as Atticus gets obliterated by a bunch of gods, and then the gods think Atticus died, and now Atticus owes Coyote one, and Coyote has a very specific plan of what he wants Atticus to do for him, and that is the story we follow for the first act. And then something happens, and the entire second act is a different book where Atticus is trying to put out fires that were left behind by the stuff that happened in book 3, which is mostly revolving around vampire politics, and certain power vacuums. But because this entire story has to be contained within the second act of a book that is not even 400 pages long, we are kind of speedrunning the entire story, and there is no payoff. The thing that is set up is a very powerful vampire friend of Atticus was taken out of commission for a hot second, so now a bunch of vampires come back into the area and there is a huge power battle. And one of the vampires that comes to town is the maker of Atticus's friend, so a very powerful vampire, one would assume. The whole thing is that Atticus's friend told his maker, hey, if I don't make it out of what happens in book 3, I want you to take over my area, or at least babysit it until I'm back to power. And now this guy doesn't want to leave and instead is pulling all of these vampires in, and that is a problem for the human population and everything. So now this vampire friend comes to Atticus. Mind you, everything that happened in book 3 was Atticus repaying a debt to that vampire friend. That vampire friend helped him with something in book 2, so in book 3 Atticus is helping the vampire friend. They are technically done with each other. But now this vampire comes back to Atticus and is like, there's a huge problem with other vampires, I need your help to kill my master. And Atticus is like, that is not my problem. That is a you problem. But then he gets tricked into killing this super duper powerful vampire that this other vampire cannot kill himself. And it is literally such a nothing burger. You would expect a huge climactic fight with tense moments. No, bitch breaks into a motel and then gets obliterated. He doesn't even say anything. He doesn't even say, we are not even told this is the master, the super duper super evil vampire, until the friend comes back in and is like, oh yeah, you killed my master, my plan worked. That was so anticlimactic. And it's a closed story because once that is done, Atticus goes back to do the thing he's supposed to do for Coyote. But because that story only has Act 1 and Act 3 and no sustainable Act 2, bits are missing, and that too is such an anticlimactic story and end to the story. It's just two nothing burgers in one book. And yes, I myself hate a drawn out Act 2. I hate writing Act 2s. I hate reading drawn out boring Act 2s. But this book is evidence for why you need an Act 2 that has something to do with your story. Because we have an Act 1 of one story, then Act 2 is an entire self-contained story, and then Act 3 is the first story again, and it just doesn't work. All of these things feel incredibly disconnected. None of it has time to breathe, to become something that is actually interesting. The story in Act 1 and 3 is just, okay, set up and that action scene, action scene, action scene, action scene, action scene, action scene, because we only get the climax. And Act 2 is completely boring, and we don't even get good action scenes because we have to speed through it, and we didn't have time to set it up, develop it, and then execute on it. So, The one thing I can say that is good about this is Act 1 and 3 in this are very much centered on Navajo culture. The problem is something that comes from Navajo mythology. These books follow multiple different mythologies. In book 1 we had the old Celtic mythology. Then in book 2 we had some Polish and German witches. In book 3 we had Norse mythology, but a bunch of other thunder gods from different mythologies chipping in. And now we have the Navajo mythology, and it is not just a random white guy writing about Navajo culture. He actually took the time to research Navajo culture, and in the afterword he actually lists a bunch of people from the Navajo tribe that helped him bring the story to life and not tell the wrong stuff. And he took the time to make sure that A, it is respectful to the culture, B, all of the information is correct, and C, that his character, this book is from Atticus's perspective and Atticus' perspective only, so we do get a white Irish guy perceiving and explaining Navajo culture to his student who is a white Irish girl. But we have Navajo characters interjecting with how it works and blah blah blah, and this white dude says multiple times, I am not in this culture, this is not my culture, and this is a culture you can't just adopt for yourself. So if you want more information about that, I have a crumb of information I collected over the 2100 years I've been alive, but if you want deeper information about stuff, you have to ask the people who are actually living this culture. And then he hands over the lecture, so to speak, to the actual Navajo people, and they then explain their own mythology. I can't speak on Irish or Navajo culture, but I believe it is done respectfully. And like I said, you get a pronunciation guide. This is the German one, but you get a pronunciation guide in the back with the actual word for things, the way you're supposed to pronounce it, and then an explanation of what it is. So I think that was done very, very well. The one thing I have to look up for a second. Yeah, okay, they don't have that. They don't have that, and I think that is good because the antagonist of this book is a skinwalker. It's actually 2 skinwalkers, but I have heard that you are not supposed to talk about them because that would attract them. I have done some research, so I wouldn't fuck this part up. You can't just talk about them. It is the Navajo saying you're not supposed to say. And I just looked in the pronunciation guide because in the book they are never called the Navajo term. They're only ever called skinwalkers. And I just looked in the pronunciation guide. It does not have the actual Navajo word for it. It doesn't describe it. So yeah, I don't know how much of that you're not supposed to say it is true, but I have heard that you're not supposed to say it. You're technically not supposed to talk about them because that could attract them and they are like a super evil kind of thing. Again, I am not Navajo. Please feel free to correct me if you are Navajo, but this ties into the whole thing that I think this depiction was done with respect. Which goes to show, even if you are a white guy writing very stereotypical white guy fantasy, you can have respect for other cultures. I stand by my saying that this is very much urban fantasy for boys and boyish men. These reads are fast, they are usually fun. This one, not so much because of the story structure, but I like to read these as a palate cleanser. I know there's a huge discussion about how many brain cells you're supposed to be using when you read something like that. This one is a read where I would say, okay, you don't need to have all of your brain cells in a row to understand this. I do like to approach books with some brain cells, which is why I'm analyzing the culture in here, especially because I have my background in cultural anthropology. Long story short, not the best book in the series so far, but I read it, and I read this for tricksters, because Coyote is a trickster god. And that bitch, you think he's nice, because you met him before, you think he's nice, but Atticus is like, don't get fooled. Don't get fooled by this guy, he's a trickster god, and trickster gods are bitches. And yeah, Coyote's a bitch. Coyote's a little bitch. Disappears at the most inopportune times, and just doesn't do things. He's very helpful, until he's not. That was very funny. I hope the next book is a bit better. I finally did it. After reading Tricked, I was a bit afloat. Let's call it the float of like, okay, what do I want to read next? Because it didn't hit as hard as I wanted it to hit. I don't want to say I'm running out of options, but I'm kind of running out of options. Every time I look at my TBR spreadsheet, it gets less and less attractive. But that reminded me of what I said at the beginning of this whole Adventurerathon thing. And I think it was, I actually said at the beginning of my very first vlog that I want to keep something for the moment when I lose steam. I have read a bunch of mangas, a bunch of comics, and then I read Tricked. I think wasn't Tricked the first like novel I read in this vlog. Anyway, I'm still feeling like I'm losing some steam. So I did the thing that I said I would do when I lose steam, and I picked up A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and I read both novellas that I'm still missing. I read The Swan Sword, and then I read The Mystery Knight, and I kind of read them back to back. Like one day I read the one, and then the other day I read the next. So yeah. So in the Sworn Sword feels weird in my mouth saying the Sworn Sword, but in the Sworn Sword, it's the second novella in the A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms series of novellas. We follow Dunk and Egg, because of course we do, and they are now in a drought. They have spent some time in Dorne after the events of the first one, the Hedge Knight. So we had the Hedge Knight with the tourney at Ashford and the whole Trial of Seven, and at the end of that they decide, hey, how about we go to Dorne? So they go to Dorne. We don't see that, but stuff happens while they are in Dorne. They learn stuff from the Dornishmen, and stuff happens in the rest of Westeros, namely a pandemic, a spring sickness, and kills a bunch of people, and now we have a new king. Not that it matters too much, but there is some talk about, okay, we have a new king and the opinions on this new king and his hand, which is not the person everyone thought it would be, including the person who thought it would be him. So he's now off sulking. But all of that is just background chatter for the actual story of the Sworn Sword. Dunk and Egg are now, I don't know exactly where they are, but they are somewhere in Westeros again, not in Dorne. I mean, Dorne technically is Westeros, but I have opinions on that. Dornish independence! So they are hanging out in this backwater town during a drought. So we had the spring sickness, and now there is a drought, and everyone is looking for water. And they are hired by some random ass dude who fell on some hard times. He's technically a lord, but he doesn't have all of the things that come with being a lord. He has his old decrepit castle, and that's about it. And there are like a couple of people living in the village around. And they try to stay alive during that drought. Dunk and Egg discover someone is stealing the water. Someone has built a dam in the stream and is now redirecting it, and it is the arch rival from the other side of the river of the guy that hired them, and that is the basic conflict. Dunk is supposed to figure out, okay, what happened to the water and get the water back. And that then ends in another tribal combat. And this novella, the first one as well, all of these novellas, they don't live from the plot, because the plot is very simple. Dunk and Egg are working for a dude, his water is being stolen, Dunk and Egg are supposed to figure out what happened to the water and get it back. That is the plot. But the characters is what makes this feel alive. The interactions between them. Egg, I love how sassy Egg is. Egg is just, he's 10, maybe 11 years old at this point, and he has so many opinions, and he shares them with anyone who listens and with people who don't listen. And it very much shows where he comes from, because he has this audacity as an 11-year-old. At the same time, you have Dunk, a 17, 18-year-old dude at this point, who has to behave like a grown-up. He has to be a man, but he's like, he has no idea what's going on. He's very dumb. He knows he's dumb. And then you have Egg with his background, and he's like a know-it-all, and he has the sass and opinions on everything, but Egg has to tone it down. He has to learn how to tone it down so people just don't randomly kill him, because that would be very inopportune. So seeing their dynamic is very cool, but also fucking Dennis. Fucking Dennis. I know in the Song of Ice and Fire fandom we talk about Stannis the Manus, Stannis Baratheon, but if we go into the past, into the Sworn Sword, there is a guy named Dennis, and Dennis, fucking Dennis, man! I really hope we never see him after this novella. He doesn't show up in the third one, but his story, he runs away at the end because of the things he did, because of the things that happened. Dennis just fucks off. And I really, really hope, now that George R.R. Martin is writing more of these novellas, I really hope that we see Dennis again and that he gets what he deserves. I need someone to give Dennis a clout in the ear. I need someone to just kick Dennis in the shin or something. Because what the fuck? Like, he's not straight up evil, but come on, man. Come on. All of that shit was so unnecessary. And also, I like the continuity of all of this. There is, again, it is not said how much time has passed between the first and the second novella, but I reckon it's about a year. And Dunk is haunted by what happened at Ashford, and my Shayla! My Shayla shows back up. If you know, you know. So I love the Sworn Sword, but I love the Mystery Knight even more, because in the Mystery Knight, the plot is very simple. Dunk and Egg go from A to B, and they hear there is a tournament, and they meet a couple of people who are on their way to that tournament, and there is a group of hedge knights, and they're like, hey, you should come to this tourney. Why not? And Dunk hasn't been to a tourney since Ashford. So now he's hesitant, but in the end he's convinced and says, yeah, I might as well go to the tourney and see what I can do, you know? So they not necessarily join these people on their way to the tourney, but they definitely go to the tourney and meet all of these people again. And then we go through this tourney. We see the tourney just happening. But again, the story is not the plot of people going to a tourney and then stuff happens. It is the people. It is the people that make these novellas so good, because Dunk is now talking to other hedge knights. He's usually alone with Egg, and now he has this group of hedge knights, and they have all done different things, and they all have different backgrounds. One of them thinks he is the bastard son of a Targaryen, or Targaryen, the bastard son of a Targaryen bastard, something like that. He thinks he has noble blood, and the price of this tourney is a dragon egg. So of course he was like, I'm gonna prove myself, blah, blah. And all of these hedge knights want to prove themselves in the tourneys, so maybe a lord will hire them. And you see all of that, but you also see lords fighting for this dragon egg, and then in the background there is a conspiracy plot going on. And then it all comes back to stuff that you have been told throughout these novellas in the background by characters. Because the context is, even before the first novella, there was a rebellion of some bastard Targaryens that were then legitimized by Aegon the Unworthy, Aegon the Fourth. Going on a little tangent here. But basically you have a bunch of Targaryens and you have a bunch of bastards, and the last act of the king before he croaked was to legitimize all of his bastards, and that led to a kind of succession crisis, which then turned into the first Blackfire Rebellion, which was then solved by Baelor and Maekar, characters you meet in the first novella. And that is still rippling through these novellas, and in the third one it comes a bit to a head where you have discussions. Okay, Red Dragon, Black Dragon, on which side did you fight? In the second novella, it is a very big question on which side did you fight? Who are you fighting for? Is it still relevant? Is it not relevant? And in the third novella, it is even more important because we meet one of the, I think he was a child of Daemon Blackfire who caused this entire rebellion. I think he was one of the 6 children or something. And he's participating in this tourney, trying to win the dragon egg to give himself legitimacy again. And Dunk is just caught up in it all. And I have to say, it is very, very confusing. It is very confusing to know your lore about Song of Ice and Fire, especially about the Targaryens. And I am watching House of the Dragon at the moment. And I love my war crime husband, uncle, daddy Daemon, but also Daemon Blackfire caused the rebellion everyone is talking about in this one, and there is another Daemon in here. So it's very confusing to read about all of these different Daemons while watching a Daemon doing things. It is, whoa, okay. They all look like Matt Smith in a blonde wig to me now, so there's that, I guess. I am definitely squinting very aggressively towards a guy named Bloodraven. If you know, you know. I do not like him. I do not like him. Bitch is shady as fuck. I don't like him. And the peak moment where it all comes full circle by the end. There is more or less a trial of combat. Dunk is not involved in the trial of combat. He sees how this trial of combat is set up, and he goes to the guy and tells him to do something very specific that Baelor told him in the first novella that saved his ass. And I was like, full circle moment, my Shayla saving the day once again from beyond the grave. My Shayla! The amount of love I have for a character that has a total of maybe 30 seconds of screen time. I am not normal about The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. The show, the book, I am so deeply in love with this. And I kid you not, I put the book down and I immediately wanted to reread everything. I have no idea how I managed to not watch the show right after reading this. And now, having talked about it, I'm very tempted to just watch the show. I might just do it, but I also have another episode of House of the Dragon to watch before that, so maybe I wait till House of the Dragon is done and then I watch Knight of the Seven Kingdoms? Who knows? I finished Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. Yes. This one is a really good romance. Good, it's healthy. I did want to strangle the female main character for a hot second because just talk to a man. Hello. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young is about 2 people who have a one-night stand on Halloween, and that one-night stand ends in a little oopsie, namely a tiny little baby. And then they both come together and decide, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to co-parent this. And then one thing leads to another, and co-parenting becomes actual parenting because they do fall in love over the course of the entire pregnancy. That is the plot. There is no more plot than that, but this is very character driven, like most romances are. I almost said no notes, but I do have some notes. The pacing, immaculate. The characters, I love them, but this is one of those instances where I sat there screaming at the book. A, just talk to each other. Just fucking talk to each other instead of just assuming. It is not quite miscommunication trope. It's just people thinking the worst case scenario is the true scenario. So I can't have what I want because of that. Just talk to a guy. All Win ever had to do was talk to her man. She just had to talk to him. And the second she did, things worked out. No, but the one note I have is this entire issue Win is having in their relationship could have been a non-issue if people, straight people specifically, heteronormativity again is the culprit here, would acknowledge the fact that humans are capable of loving more than one person, even in a romantic sense. I mean that with my full chest. Humans are capable of loving more than one person. Period. I am of the firm opinion so many cheating things could have been taken away with if we just acknowledged that humans are not meant to be monogamous. Call me a monogamy hater. Some people can make it work, and I love that for them, but why do we demonize having multiple partners? You know? If everyone is open about it and communicating about it, I don't know. It's just such a society thing that you have one partner and one partner only, and once you have that partner, you're not allowed any other partner. You're not even allowed to think about other people. But we're not here to discuss that. I just think the issue Win had with Rob could have been solved if we remembered people are capable of loving people, but also just talk to the man. Just talk to the man. I do love the fact that once the pregnancy hits, we get little chapter headers that tell us how much time has passed. It's like 15 weeks pregnant, and then later on, when she's more pregnant, you get another one, and then you get little fun facts like the baby is the size of an apple. I didn't know that at 15 weeks you have an apple in your oven, so that was cool to know, I guess. I do have to say, I like the pacing of this. Like, we know for a fact that this book takes place over 9 months because of this pregnancy and because we get information of how far along she is. Like, 9 weeks pregnant, baby is the size of a grape, 6 weeks later you have an apple. Wow. And I do like the pacing in this because it could have been very drawn out, given that you have 9 months of these people just basically living together and trying to figure each other out. But it's not drawn out because we only get snapshots. It's very slice of life, but we only get the snapshots where important things happen. And I like that. It is not drawn out in the slightest. The pacing is very on point. I do love all of the characters, main characters, side characters. Everyone is just impeccable. Also, pregnant people are allowed to shag. Actually beneficial, especially if you finish. Actually very good. Like the whole hormone body chemistry thing. It's apparently very beneficial for pregnant people. The one thing I really, really didn't like is actually the epilogue. I did not vibe with the epilogue. The whole love story is about these two people falling in love over having to be together and committing to having this accidental baby. And then the epilogue is 10 years later and we now have a full soccer team of kids. I think we have 4 children. And yes, Win is the working mom and she has her camp for kids with disabilities. And dad is a stay-at-home dad to take care of the kids. So cool for that one. We need more representation of that. But I don't know. I just didn't vibe with the whole, hey, it worked once, let's have an entire barn full of kids. I don't know. It felt, it's not that I don't appreciate them having kids. And yeah, they fell in love, of course. Maybe they do want to have more kids. That's not the point I'm having here. It's just, it feels weird. It just feels weird to then have it all about these kids. The epilogue very much feels like, haha, and then they just kept on going. There's even a line, I can't find it right now, but there's a line about him putting another one in her. And I'm like, that was a wee bit unnecessary, don't you think? So I didn't vibe with that epilogue, but you can totally read it without the epilogue. It is so cute. It ends with the birth of the baby, and that was very cute. Yeah, it actually ends on the birth announcement card of the little one, so that was very, very nice. This book also beautifully represents people who have prosthetics. In this case, he is an amputee due to some medical issues, and she has a limb difference. She was born with a tiny hand, as she calls it, with like underdeveloped fingers, I believe it was. And there is a kid in here. She teaches the kid how to swim because the kid doesn't know how to swim with his own tiny hand. So she teaches him how to do that. And by the end, she runs a camp for kids with disability, a summer camp, so they can feel normal for once and that they can do things they can't do because people are shitty to them. Like, this boy totally could swim like any other person, but because of society bullying him for his hand, he tried to over adjust for it, and that had him then like go to the side for stuff like that. It's also own voices because Hannah Bonham Young herself has a tiny hand. She starts the book off with a note that she has a tiny hand, and she herself was pregnant, I think right before writing this book or while writing this book, something like that. So this is very much own voices, and it was a good book. I really liked this book. It was such an easy read, such a breeze. I really liked everything about it except the whole, okay, if we stop being monogamous for a single second, we would have none of these issues. But yeah, I love this one. There comes my puppy. I guess I'm wrapping this up here. But yeah, I read this. I read this and I enjoyed it, and yes. Okay, July is now over. I didn't vlog the entire last week of the Adventurerathon because I was over at my aunt's house sitting, dog sitting, garden sitting. So I didn't vlog over there, but I did still get some stuff read. Let's start with the thing I read on the day that I went over. I just read early in the morning, just something. I read Bigfoot Sommelier Butt Tasting. Don't ask. Just don't ask. I will not accept any questions about this. It was strangely wholesome, but I think the Space Raptor one was better. There is nothing to say about Bigfoot Sommelier Butt Tasting because it is all in the title. You have a guy who goes to a vineyard with his friends and he meets a Bigfoot who happens to be a sommelier, and the Bigfoot is making very obvious moves, and they have a date in the evening because the Bigfoot wants to taste his butt, and then they shag, and then they become partners for life, and they start to run the vineyard. That is literally it. It's not even 20 pages long. There's not much more to say about that. A quick, fun read. Just don't ask. And then I went to my aunt's, and my cousin, my younger cousin, shout out to you, little fucker. I know that you're watching these videos. He asked me to do some stuff for him in Stardew Valley. He loves Stardew Valley ever since I gave him this game. He's addicted to it. And he asked me while he is away, could I clean up his farm and do some stuff for him that he thinks is tedious. So I was like, yeah, no problem. I love doing that. I love Stardew Valley myself. So I set my ass down and played a bunch of Stardew Valley for him while listening to the 2 audiobooks I had on my TBR. I specifically put them off for this week, knowing I would play a bunch of Stardew Valley, and this game is perfect for audiobooking. The first thing I listened to is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This was a reread for me because I have never finished the trilogy. I am missing the last 100 pages. I've been sitting on the last 100 pages since 2020, I think. And now that there is a second trilogy out there, I wanted to finish the first trilogy, but it has been so long, I wanted to reread the entire thing and then finally tackle those last 100 pages and the emotional trauma that's probably heading my way because of that. And yeah, it was a fun time. I do have to say, I now get the criticism. I read this at an age where it is supposed to be read. You know, the weird phase between reading YA and reading adult books. That is when I read this book originally, and that is definitely the weird age range this book is intended for. It still reads kind of YA, but the characters have aged out of that, but it's also from the topics in it. It's not quite YA, it's a bit older than that. I think nowadays we would call that new adult, I guess. I don't know, but I also don't really want to call it new adult. It's a whole thing. It's a very weird age bracket. And now that I am older, I definitely get the criticism that this sounds younger than what it probably should be. If this were written for an older audience in mind, it would have a very different vibe to it. I still liked it. Still fucking hate Delilah. I am sorry, but I am a Delilah Bard hater. Everything that happens to her is because she wants to be the main character so desperately, and I think that is kind of obnoxious. I also think she has zero chemistry with Kel. I'm sorry, but the Kel-Delilah pairing, they kind of work as friends with the sass and the banter, but the whole romance that is hinted at in this book, I just don't see it. They don't have the right chemistry for it, to be honest. I'm sorry. And the one thing that probably came with a bit of introspect, Kel being the brother of the prince, that the first time I read this, I recognized it as not a good relationship he has with his parents, but now recognizing him as being property hits different. It hit different. But yeah, I enjoyed my time with it again. Like, literally again. The reread was nice. I also reread it in a different language. The first time I read it in German. I read the German version when I first read it, and now I read the English version. I won this in a personal giveaway at some point. That's why I have both editions. Usually I don't have more than one edition of a book. But yeah. The other two books I only have in German. But yeah, I read it in English, and I do have to say the translation is very accurate. The vibes are there. The vibes are the way they are supposed to be. So I listened to this audiobook, and I blasted through it. But then I still had a bunch of Week and Stardew Valley left to go. So I picked up One Dark Window by Rachel Billick, and I just saw this is where my bookmark went right before I left. Not long before I left. I got my birthday present, my very late birthday present from Kirsty, because customs fucked up. And part of that birthday present was this beautiful, beautiful bookmark. And she gave that to me because my birthday was in March. So it was at the height of my obsession with The Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But because The Night of the Seven Kingdoms just came out, there wasn't a lot of merch. And apparently she tried to get me some Night of the Seven Kingdoms stuff, but there wasn't, so she went for medieval aesthetics instead, and I am so here for it. This isn't my new favorite bookmark. I'm not even joking. This is my new favorite bookmark. But yeah, I listened to One Dark Window, which is also a reread because I listened to this ages ago, and I have book 2, but I never read book 2. I have this since it came out, but I never read it, so I wanted to reread book 1 so that I can read book 2, and these two are on my 12 and 12 to read thingamathing thing, and Two Twisted Crowns is on my r/fantasy bingo. So what better time than now to put it on. Darker Shade of Magic is also on my 12 and 12 because I wanted to reread and then finish the series, and book 2, not book 1 but book 2, is also on my r/fantasy bingo. So I made a lot of progress just reading these two books. But yeah, One Dark Window is a dark, atmospheric, gothic, gotta catch them all card game fantasy where all of the magic is set in these 12 cards, and we are trying to collect all of them. And we follow a character who has the Nightmare, which is a creature from one of these cards, and he is in her head, and through him she can see these cards, which makes her a valuable asset to the people who want to collect all of these cards to save someone else's brother. And I do have to agree, the first time I read this, it was fine. Now that I reread it, I have to agree with a lot of people who say that the romance was completely unnecessary, because it is. There is a romance in here. It doesn't kick off until, I want to say, halfway through the book, but it quickly becomes the focus after that, which is very unnecessary. You could have kept it in the background, because both of these characters are main characters in the story, so you could have kept it, the story still present without it taking center stage, because I think center stage belongs to these cards, to the card collecting story, and the problem that comes with all of that, and the fact that we need to hide all of that, and the conspiracy we are now part of because of these cards. And I love, 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 love the Nightmare. I still love the Nightmare. He is sassy, he has opinions on everything, and he lets her know his opinions. And because he's such a diva, his opinions mostly also come in very cryptic rhymes, and I love that. Gotta say, the plot twist about the Nightmare, I saw that coming a mile away when I read it the first time. I saw it again coming from a mile away the second time around. Same hallmarks. It is not that much of a mystery. You can figure it out yourself very early on. It's still a good twist though. You being able to figure it out early does not mean it's a bad twist. It's a good twist. It is a solid twist, and the timing of it is perfect. And I enjoyed my time with it, and I can now move forward with the duology. So these were my audiobooks. But given the sheer amount I had to play Stardew Valley for, because my cousin gave me a 2-page long to-do list. I knew it would have been impossible. It was impossible. I didn't get to all of it, but I think I made good progress, and I got like halfway through everything. I had to grind so hard for all of that. So I played a lot of Stardew Valley just reading these 2 books via audiobook. But I didn't have any other audiobooks, so I was like, okay. Also, the month was slowly coming to an end, and I was losing my reading mojo again. And and I still had so much more to go. There were still three full novels, 400 pages on there, and a couple of short stories, and I just couldn't. I did the math at some point, and I think I had 450 to 500 pages to read every day in order to hit it, and I was like, that is impossible. So I tried to make it easier on me, and I used my 3 free swaps. You get 3 swaps on your TBR. When you announce it, you can take 3 of those and switch it throughout the month. And I did that, and I cut it down. I, of course, have notes. I changed my plans for the snakes because I wasn't feeling a very artsy, almost 300-page long comic and then some for the snakes prompt. So I instead looked up, on purpose, the weirdest snake mangas, manhwas, whatever you can find. And I found one that was about a snake impregnating a guy who then has to incubate the eggs. Sadly, that didn't have an ISBN, so I couldn't use that. I would have loved to read that for this. But it didn't have an ISBN, so it wouldn't count. So instead, I pivoted and I picked up The Great Snake's Bride, which is a similar premise. It's about a lady who is kind of sacrificed to a giant snake up a mountain because the people in the village think this snake is a god. Turns out the snake's just a giant snake who can talk. But she has been married to the snake now, and the snake is just doing husband things, and she is completely confused because her first thought is that he's going to eat her, but then turns out he just wants to have a wife. So they have to figure that out together, and it takes them a moment to get there, and then he has to hibernate, and in winter she's all alone, and stuff happens, and blah. And by the end, they figure it out, they actually fall in love, and they have a husband and wife relationship, including sex, which was so whack. It's so whack. It's not very explicit. There are some scenes where she's naked, but it's not explicit. You don't see a snake doing it with her. It's insinuated, you know? And I read the first 2 volumes of that, and then it is indeed very wacky, and I'm actually contemplating of continuing this series because it is just the right amount of wacky, but there's still a solid enough plot / relationship between these two. And by the end of the 2nd volume, there's a little cliffhanger because a monk comes to the mountain, and apparently this monk and the snake have beef for some reason, but then the volume was over, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. So I read that for the snake prompt. Then I changed my murder mystery prompt from The Grave Between Us by Tal Bauer to All the Lies by St. Abby, Stabby, which is the 4th and penultimate, look at me using intelligent words, installment of the Mindfuck series, because that is like a 1/3 of the length of the other book I had. And I read that, and this is the one where Logan finally connects the pieces. Logan finally connects the pieces about Lana. And I love the psychological aspect of it all, where Lana just terrorizes this tiny village in the middle of nowhere. And I love that all of these terrible, terrible people finally get what they deserve. I love that. But it ends with Logan finding out. I really, really, really need to finish that series as soon as possible. Like, what do you mean? Because we had a couple of people piecing things together, but they didn't want to tell Logan without having concrete proof, and then Logan found out. And we had discussions about vigilantism and where is the line, and would you still love me if I were a worm, but would you still love me if I were a serial killer, but the people I kill were really horrible people? It's like, I eat this shit up, man. I eat this shit up. And then I switched another one. The 3rd switch I had is, God, what was that again? I had volume 1 and 2 of Fire Force down for the Robin Hood squad goal prompt, and I put in volume 3 and 4, I think, for Traitors and Betrayers, because at the end of volume 2, we start attacking another firehouse, Firehouse 5, and that entire business is in volume 3, and we get more information about stuff that then leads to volume 4. So we have Firehouse 5, which are technically traitors to the cause of, we want to figure out where this spontaneous human combustion comes from. We have that story arc in volume 3, and then in volume 4 we have a single character who knows where it's coming from, and he's actively doing it to people, so he's a traitor to the cause as well. And yeah, I read those 2 for the Traitors and Betrayers one, and now knowing, when first I started reading this, when first I started reading Fire Force, I didn't know it was a prequel to Soul Eater, but now knowing it's a prequel to Soul Eater, I'm starting to see all of the connections, because the guy who betrays everyone in volume 4. I know exactly who his descendant is in Soul Eater. For context, everyone in Soul Eater is a descendant of the people in Fire Force. And I know exactly where one of the main characters of Soul Eater comes from because of this storyline. And I'm like, seeing all of these connections now is just so cool. I'm like the conspiracy board meme guy with this now. But yeah, I just have so much fun with this. Hibana, the volume 3 thing with Firehouse 5, her trauma is just so real. Like, she lives in this world where people spontaneously combust into fire, and she herself is a 3rd generation fire user, so she can make fire, and her ability, she wants to make it pretty. She makes all of these flower images, and she knows chemistry. She's a scientist. So from an early age, she knew, okay, if I add copper to this fire, it gets this color. She made pretty flowers for all of the kids that were in the orphanage with her. And the nuns always told her, tone it down, we don't want you to set anything on fire, be careful, blah, blah, blah. And she was careful. And she made all of these pretty flowers for all of the other orphans. And then one day, the thing everyone feared the most happened. And the nuns burst into fire and killed every kid in that nunnery except Hibana and the priestess of Firehouse 8, the characters we follow. And that broke Hibana, because now she didn't see fire as something beautiful, something useful. She saw it as a danger, and we will all burn in the end, so what does it matter? And she became this twisted scientist who just wanted to do experiments on people. She didn't give a fuck. And that was just so real. And the fact that we fight her, but we don't beat her by just pummeling her with anything. We beat her by slapping her in the face and telling her, you can be a hero, your fire is beautiful, and your brain, you're a scientist. We need your knowledge to figure out what causes this so we can prevent it from happening again. And that, in combination with the slap, just woke her up out of this twisted thing, and now she's helping the main characters. And I just love that. And then you get the action scene, because then we meet Firehouse 1, and oh my god, listen. My favorite character, I knew he was cool. I forgot how much aura he farms in his first ever fight. He's not even fighting. Like, these characters throw everything they have at him and he doesn't even shrug. He literally just catches a plasma blade with his bare hand, takes it, and then shreds it, and then he takes a step and just everything explodes.
後悔するなよ。手抜いてんじゃねえ。
The way Commander Burns farms aura is just insane, and I love him. And that's just the first action scene we get from Volume 4. After that, we have the whole betrayal plot, which is just action scene, action scene, action scene. That is an enemy you have to pummel into the ground to beat him. That's ridiculous. I love this stupid manga so much. But that is it. That is it. I did not continue reading after that. I was missing, ultimately, I don't know how many books. I think it was just 3 or 4. And I was missing about 750 pages. But 3 days before the end, I was just, I could not read anymore. I was just dying, essentially. So I said to myself, this is not worth it. I don't want to hate reading. So I will stop it here. And I took it easy for a couple of days. And I just relaxed. And I'm now getting my reading mojo back. It is now the, 3rd? I'm getting my reading mojo back. Everything is cool. Everything is hunky-dory. I'm reading my arcs. I overcame the sunken cost fallacy, and I was fine with not hitting every single prompt. I gave it a really, really good try. I read so much. I had some really good reads. I had one DNF. I didn't talk about it, I think. But I DNF'd City of Others because it was just boring. But it was a really good reading month overall. Quality, quantity, and I had fun. It was exhausting, and I'm probably not gonna do that again anytime soon. Watch me do it again for William. But I had fun. So I will end this vlog here. Let me know in the comments if you participated in the Adventurerathon and how you fared. Did you collect your pages? Did you have fun? And if you don't want to talk to me at all, leave a scroll emoji down in the comments below, because it is very fitting for the round we've had. And yeah, I guess I will see you in the next video. Bye!